Hello, greetings, and welcome to this video on essay planning. I hope you find it helpful. Now, I assume that you're watching this video because you actually got a specific essay to work on. So what I suggest, the best way to watch this video is to actually do the things that I suggest as we watch it, as we're going along. In other words, each time I suggest something, pause the video and actually do it. I'll give you little reminders along the way, but that's what I suggest. So if you haven't already, get yourself a blank sheet of paper or a blank Word document open, and put the title of your essay at the top, and let's begin. Now, the most essential type of essay writing is planning the essay, but sometimes it's difficult to know where to start. So you need to start, in my view, not with reading, not with researching, not with revising, and so on, but you really need to start with thinking, just thinking. Don't have any books or anything around. Stage one is thinking, okay? So, like I said, get a blank piece of paper, get your essay title at the top. Once you've done this, the first thing to do is to consider where you stand on the issue right now. As Malcolm X said, if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. Never a truer word was said. So think about where you self stand on the topic that you are writing about. For example, let's say you're writing an essay on House of Lords reform. What do you think about it? Do you think that the House of Lords should be elected? Or do you think it's okay to have things carry on as they are, with the Prime Minister just appointing whoever he wants? What is your gut feeling? So on your paper, write down your thoughts now, okay? Pause the video, write down what is your immediate gut feeling, instinctive response to the question that you're asking, okay? Pause the video and write it down. Okay, unpause the video. Well, obviously, if you're watching this, but you've already unpaused the video, welcome back. Once you've established then your own feelings on the matter, what you need to do is kind of go into those, interrogate your feelings a little bit, have a conversation with yourself about them. Why do you think that? Okay, scroll down through my notes here. For example, maybe your feeling was, well, yeah, surely the House of Lords, it should be elected. Okay, well, why? Think about it. You might think, well, we live in a democracy, and in a democracy it's supposed to be the people who have the power. That's what democracy means, after all, ruled by the people. So surely that means the parliament that makes the laws should be chosen by the people, right? Okay, very good. Write it down. But don't stop there. Keep pushing yourself. Yeah. Ask again, well, why? Why should parliament be chosen by the people? You might think, oh, well, if people don't have control of parliament, then parliament might just make laws that only benefit themselves. Yeah, okay, right. So write it down. Yeah, but keep going. Ask yourself more questions. How could having an elected House of Lords help to prevent that situation where lawmakers are making laws that benefit only themselves? Oh, well, if they are elected, then people will be able to get rid of any peers who they felt were abusing their power or not acting in the interests of the public. Yeah? Okay, very good. Write it down. And do this, continue the same process. Just keep asking yourself, well, why is that? Develop that point. Why? Okay. And do the same with any other arguments that you might think of to back up your initial point of view. Okay, so again, pause the video and want you to, for each of the arguments you've got written down, well, write down the arguments first of all, and then kind of interrogate yourself, develop them. Why is that? How can I explain that more fully? Okay, go ahead. All right, welcome back. Now, depending on the topic, you might get a lot written down at this stage. Ooh, I hope you can still see me wobbling the thing a bit. Or you might not get very much. Okay, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. If you haven't got very much written down at this stage because it's a topic you're a bit unfamiliar with, don't worry, it doesn't matter. The key point is to really think through your own position, your own reasoning on the issue at the outset. Okay, it might change, yeah, as you do your research. That's fine. That's good, actually. There's nothing wrong with changing your mind in response to new information. That just shows that you're a thinking person. But the important thing, in my opinion, is to take a stock check of wherever you're at on the topic right now, your opinions, your level of knowledge, right from the start, because this is going to help you to understand what the gaps are in your knowledge, the gaps are in your explanations and understanding of the topic, and what you still need to look up or find out. Okay, so the next thing I'd suggest, and again, do this first, still without looking at any books or other information, is to consider the counter arguments, right? So what we've done so far, you've said what is your feeling, what is your initial response to the question, do you agree or not, do you support this thing or not, and then you've put down what you can think of in terms of the reasons for that, the arguments. Okay, now think about, well, what would someone with the opposite opinion say? Yeah, so for our example, what would someone say who was against having an elected second chamber, an elected House of Lords? Yeah, what would they say? Okay, so think through these possible counter arguments, and again, write them down, and again, develop them. Keep asking yourself, well, why is that? How can you explain that further? So pause the video and do that. Write down all that you can think of possible counter arguments to your initial position. Okay, go ahead. All right, once you've done that, then think, well, okay, now imagine you're in an argument there in the heat of the moment. How would you respond to those opposing arguments? For example, you could consider the argument against the House of Lords, that there's an argument, well, it would kind of, there would just be too many elections, it would be too complicated, people wouldn't know who was their representative. Is it their MP who's supposed to represent them, or is it their elected peer? Who do they hold to account if things go wrong? Opens the door to complication and confusion. Yeah, it's better to have, these people would say, better to have a clear dividing line between the House of Commons that represents the people and is elected by them, and then the House of Lords, whose job is not so much representation, but to provide expert advice and opinion. And if you have an elected House of Lords, you basically end up with just two House of Commons. They're replicating the same function, both trying to do the same thing, and they're going to fight, and you're going to get gridlock, and it's going to get complicated, and it's just unnecessary, right? We already have an argument, so that we already have a House of Commons. The argument goes, we don't need another one, right? So what would you say to that argument? How could you argue against that argument? Because ideally, your essay is going to be making a clear argument throughout. It's not just going to present two sides and then kind of conclude which is better at the end. The very best essays have a consistent argument running throughout. So they give the other point of view, yes, but they argue against it. They show why those arguments are maybe less important than the ones they're putting forward. Okay, if you aim to do that, then you're setting yourself up to do very well indeed. So, okay, so again, pause the video then and think of all of the, or have you done that already? I'm losing track now. Oh yes, you've already thought of the counter arguments. Now think about how, pause the video, think about how you would then respond to those opposing arguments. How could you challenge the other side, if you like? How could you challenge those opposing arguments? What could you say in response to them? Okay, pause the video and have a go. Okay, so if you were able to think of, sorry, no, I'm confusing myself. So at the end of this process, you should have at least a few ideas now about A, where you stand on the issue, what you believe, what's your opinion. B, some arguments to back this up. C, some idea of some of the counter arguments. And perhaps even D, some ideas about how you would challenge those counter arguments. Yeah. Okay. So that all this is so far just from your head, right? From your what you think and what you already know. So now comes to the research stage, stage 2, research. All right. So this is where you bulk out your plan. Yep. So the purpose of this stage of your planning is to turn what you have now, is probably a fairly scrappy piece of paper with a few, maybe a bit half-baked arguments on it, into a solid, meaty, comprehensive essay plan containing all the information you need to write a fully informed, beautifully argued, absolutely killer essay. All right, this is to transform from your initial thoughts to that. Okay, so what you need for this stage, what you need to do for this stage is this. First, gather together then all the books, articles, your own notes, and any other resources you have that will provide you with information on this topic. But once you've got all this together, before you start looking through all of that, have another look at the notes that you've just made already. Think about what exactly do you need to sort of fill the gaps. For example, maybe you only had one real argument to support your judgment, yeah? So you'll need to look out for maybe a couple more arguments in support of your case. Another example, maybe you had several good arguments, but no specific cases or examples from real life to back these arguments up. Yeah, so you're going to need to look for some more supporting evidence. Okay, maybe you couldn't think of any counter arguments, okay, in which case you need to be looking out for those. Or maybe you came up with a counter argument, but you found it actually hard to argue against. I'm not sure how I'd deal with that argument. So you'll be on the lookout for how to challenge that argument, yeah? Or maybe it's been so convincing, you convince yourself to change your opinion, which is fine. But the point is that when you do your reading and research, make sure you're reading for a purpose, right? You know exactly what you're looking out for, what information you need. This will make your reading that much more efficient, yeah? And kind of purposeful. So when you find information that is useful, add it to your plan. And don't only stick to the textbooks here, by the way. What I suggest is first go to the textbook and any class notes and bits and pieces that I've given you, but also go beyond that, yeah, because it's going to make it more interesting for yourself. Go online, find some articles on the subject. Yeah, newspapers like The Guardian, The Independent, The Times, The Telegraph, they're all going to have pieces about pretty much all of the subjects that we cover in politics, as are magazines like New Statesman, politics.co.uk, also very good. So have a look on those. Use their little internal search engines to find, about the whatever you're writing about, codified constitution. You will find pieces arguing for and against. Be aware that they're likely to be very opinionated, so they're not likely to give a balanced view necessarily, but they may nevertheless make some good points or provide some useful facts and figures that you can use in your essay. So in a second, I'm going to get you to pause the video, to go online, and to look at least 2 articles relevant to your essay and use them to add detail to your plan. Okay? Do also note down the names of the commentators you use and include these in your plan as well. So go ahead, pause the video now and go ahead and do that. Okay, so I think actually I forgot to tell you to pause the video to do the initial stuff of going through your own textbook and adding to your plan and so on. So you need to do that as well. So if you haven't done that, do that now. Pause the video. Okay, welcome back. So by this stage now, you should have then gone through all of your textbooks and stuff, as well as a couple of online articles, and really bulked out your plan. Remember, a good plan should include probably at least 3 arguments to support the case that you're making, and probably at least 2 of the opposing arguments. For each of the arguments, a good plan should have, I'd always use bullet points, a few bullet points of development of these arguments, explanation, detail, as well as an example or 2 to back each of them up. And the very best plans will also include some notes on, as we discussed before, how you intend to rebuff the opposing arguments. That is how you intend to counter the arguments opposite to the case that you're making. Okay, so you've done the thinking, you've done the research, and you should now have then a pretty meaty, comprehensive plan. I would suggest, roughly speaking, you'd probably aiming for the plan to be probably 2 pages, unless you write very small. It wants to, want all the information on that plan that you're going to use for the essay. That's the intention. And at this stage, what I would suggest is that you leave it there for the day, come back to it the next day, sleep on it, have another look at the plan the next day and see if you're going to adjust it at all. So go ahead. I'll see you tomorrow. Okay, pause the video. Right now, I'm assuming it's now the next day. And what we're going to do is stage 3, read through everything that you've written, adjust, amend, polish the plan as appropriate. We're going to revise the plan. I don't mean revise as in try and learn it all by memory. What I mean is revise in terms of, going back over it, checking if it needs to be tweaked and so on. And there's a couple more things we still need to add as well. So this stage involves more thinking. The stage aims to get you completely ready to start writing your essay. So first of all, read through your plan. And as you do, ask yourself the following kinds of questions. Is it clear what your argument is? Yeah, as you read through. Is there enough information to back up what you're saying? Are you using appropriate, sophisticated, specific vocabulary, or do you need to look up some phrases and so on? But most importantly, do you still feel the same way? Do you believe in this argument you're putting forward? Has your research changed your mind at all? Your initial answer to the question, after all, might have changed after you research the question more thoroughly. If this is so, adapt your plan accordingly. And it may be that your judgment has become more nuanced now. It may be that you think, well, actually, I can see some of the arguments a bit more clearly now for having an appointed House of Lords, but I still feel we should have an elected one. So maybe you might want to consider the plan of a partially elected House of Lords or something like this. Yeah. So does your judgment change at all? Do you need to tweak it, make it more nuanced and so on? Okay. So you're now ready for the final 2 planning stages. First of which is planning your conclusion. Now, far too many students leave the conclusion as a kind of afterthought to their essay. They present 2 opposing sides in the essay, and then at the end, pretty randomly, just choose one side kind of arbitrarily and say, all right, I support that, and that's the conclusion. Well, this is a real shame, because people who do this have missed an opportunity to practice a really important, useful skill, which is that of summarizing and prioritizing your arguments. Okay? So conclusion, obviously the basis of a conclusion needs to do 2 things. It needs to make a clear judgment. Yes or no, do you support this thing or not? And secondly, give the most important reason for this judgment. However, don't just repeat what you've already said in the essay. Explain what it is that makes this argument so important. Why does this argument outweigh all the counter arguments against it? For example, let's say that you've concluded your essay on House of Lords reform, which we're using as our example, by saying that, yeah, we should have an elected second chamber because it's more democratic. Okay? Now, the best essays will explain, well, why is this democratic aspect so much more important than any of the arguments that could be made for keeping the House of Lords appointed? For example, that it's a way to bring in experts and specialists and so on, people who might not be interested in competing in elections, but who've got valuable expertise and experience that they can bring to bear on the lawmaking process, right? Now, I'm not going to tell you how you can answer that, what makes democracy more important than expertise. But the point is, what you might be doing then in your conclusion is making that argument about, well, why is democracy more important than expert opinion? So can you see you're doing something different, a little bit different in your conclusion than what you've been doing in the essay so far? You're actually prioritizing arguments now, rather than just presenting them. You're saying why some arguments are more important, more significant than others, and why. Okay, so pause the video now and in a second and plan out your conclusion. What is your judgment? What is the main reason for it? And why is that reason more important than any of the other opposing reasons against it? Okay, so pause the video and do that now. Okay, so we're very nearly done with our plan now. There's just one more thing left to do, if you haven't already, and that is the introduction. Even though it comes at the beginning when you come to write up the essay, I find it's easier to plan it at the end because you know where the essay's going, what's argument's going to be and stuff by that point. Now, there are mixed views about what should go into an introduction. Some people, for example, think it should explain the structure of the essay. Some don't. I would say the only absolutely essential thing to do in an introduction is to define the key terms. That's the baseline. That's the essential thing to do. So, for example, we've been the example we've been looking at. You would want to explain what the House of Lords is. Okay, something about what is the House of Lords, some kind of definition. Beyond that, I think the introduction is a good place to give us sort of some context to the topic. In other words, give some of the recent history of that topic, of that debate. So again, for the House of Lords example, in your introduction, you could explain that reform of the House of Lords has been on the agenda ever since Tony Blair's government removed most of the hereditary peers under the House of Lords Act 1999. And that was always intended to be just stage one of the reform process. Stage two was always intended to be some kind of elections to the second chamber, some kind of elected second chamber. You could add, to update it, you could add that the Conservative Liberal coalition government under David Cameron did put forward legislation to move towards an 80% elected House of Lords, but that was defeated by Conservative backbenchers, and that reform has ground to a halt basically since then. But that the underlying issues have not gone away. Something like that, right? A bit of context to the debate. What has been happening in recent years on this issue? What is it that's been happening that's made this a kind of a live issue, a live debate, and so on. Okay, so pause the video in a second and plan your introduction. Remember, you want to define any key terms. You'll add a bit of context to the issue. Why is this issue being discussed now? What is the recent history of this topic, of this debate? Okay, so pause the video and have a go at that. Okay, so like I say, some people in the introduction, they like to say, oh, this essay is going to argue that, blah, blah, blah. You can do that, but far too often I see people sort of wasting time in their introductions, and they say things like, oh, this essay is going to first of all look at the arguments in favor of an elected House of Lords, then it's going to look at the arguments against. I mean, that's a waste of time. That's a waste of time writing that, because the examiner knows you're going to do that. That's what an essay does. You may as well write, this essay is going to have a number of sentences joined together and eventually it's going to come to a halt. It's totally pointless. So unless you're going to specifically say what exactly your argument's going to be in the introduction, then I would say kind of skip all of that. Define the key terms, give some context, and get into it. All right. So you now should have an absolutely banging, solid essay plan ready to write your essay. Or rather, what I'm going to ask you to do probably is to bring it into class and discuss with me first. And I very much look forward to seeing it. Well done.